Hi, who do we have there?
Hi, it's Pam.
Hi, Pam. Pam, you have a light on behind you. So
Yeah.
I can't see a thing. You're just black. So if you
Okay.
could move so that your light is in front of you, like mine is, we'll be able to see you. Yeah, better.
Hey, better?
Way better, way better.
Okay.
All right. And you're the first one on.
Oh, well, finally, I'm not late for something.
Hey, that's great.
Yeah. So, how you been?
I've been good. I just got back from the Pine Ridge Reservation, and that's
Oh,
always pretty demanding and exhausting, but
uh,
it was good. Who joined
this
us?
Dorothy.
Here's Dorothy. Hi.
Can you see her?
Yeah. So, Pam, you are still very much in the black. Did you change your
Ah,
lighting?
okay. I'm
Okay.
always trying to, yeah, I sit on the floor because I hate chairs. They're just too restricting. So,
Okay. All right. I can see your face now. So, Dorothy, can you hear us?
I can, and I can see two of you.
Great. This Pam Fisher here has
Hi,
joined us.
Pam.
Dorothy.
I did not. Well, I heard from Liz Rembold, and she's not going to be able to join us tonight. She has a family commitment that came up. And then I also heard
Okay.
from Tanya, who had some great questions, and she has a sick husband and a stepson who's having some problems. So she may or may not be able to join
Okay.
us.
She had
Probably
some good
not.
questions.
Yeah, she had great questions. So
Yeah.
um, I told her, I said, oh gosh, it'd be nice if you could come on for just a few minutes. But she said she'd try. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
question.
Well, we're a little early.
Yeah.
Pamela, where do you live?
I live in Maine.
Oh, very good. The other side of the country.
Yes, way on the other side. I don't know about your side, but my side's pretty cold.
Now, it doesn't ever get too cold here.
Uh, it's been I don't like the cold, so I'm living in the wrong state. It is what it is.
Georgette.
Okay, it looks
Oh,
like Georgette has joined us.
hi, Georgette.
Oh,
Oh,
no sound yet.
no sound yet.
Georgette, can you hear us? Hi, Georgette, can you hear us?
Hello.
Ah,
Hello.
good. Can you hear us now?
Yes,
All
finally.
right.
Great, great. Welcome, Georgette.
Hi, Georgette. I'm Dorothy.
Hi, Dorothy. How are you?
So nice to meet you. I'm fine. How are you?
Great. It's such a pleasure to meet you.
And where are you? Where are you beaming in from?
I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Wonderful. This is exciting.
And
Yeah.
I think that Katrina Gresseth is going to join us, and I think Lanisha Hancock will join us too.
Oh, Georgette, I was just looking at your questions. You have some very good questions too.
Oh, thank you. Thank
This will
you.
be interesting
Oh, yeah. I'm glad that you could find time to.
for me. I love to talk about my writing. you know.
How many books have you written, if you don't mind me asking? I'm sorry. I guess I should start the questions already.
That's all
Go
right.
right ahead, Georgette.
Well, I've written 10 books total,
Wow.
but only two are novels that I've written since I stopped doing academic writing for social work kinds of audiences, students, and etc. So now I'm into fiction writing. So I actually have three novels, but the first one I'm so embarrassed by I don't even mention it.
Oh no.
It was my experiment. I was kind of trying to learn how to do it. I'm still trying to learn how to do it.
Well, I'll say you did a great job on this one, so I'm sure the first one was good as well.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate your saying that. I actually like this one. My of the two that I claim, the first one was called Just Mercy, and it was about a family whose daughter had been murdered, and the murderer got the death penalty, and it takes place in Texas. So that's being used in criminal justice courses now.
Yeah.
It's more of a family drama, part mystery, part family drama. But when I got to At the Center, all of a sudden I found myself writing mystery.
Well, I see that we are past 7:30, so I think, and I just realized I thought that I had paused, but I haven't. So everything has been recorded, and so the students who can't join us will be able to hear our conversation.
Okay.
So, and just to clarify, I did check with Dorothy to make sure that she was the kind of social worker who likes to be called by her first name.
Yes.
And she is, as I am too. And so feel free to refer to Dorothy as Dorothy. And I also shared with her that I asked for a phonetic pronunciation of her last name. And my husband and I have this ongoing debate about the pronunciation of Dr. Seuss, or as he says, Dr. Zeus. And so I sent Dorothy a little link to the argument. And I think I won. And your name is Dorothy Van Soest.
Seuss. It's like Dr. Seuss, and you are correct. With a T on the end. With a T on the end. Dr.
I just love it when I'm right and he's not so.
But that helps to explain why so many people pronounce my name Zoist. And I never could figure out where that came from.
Well, I told Craig, and he said he was just delighted that he could educate you as to that particular thing. So, all right. Well, I don't know which student wants to go first. I know we've got some questions from other students who are not online yet, but Georgette, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first.
Okay.
So, Dorothy, my first question is the daughter of the melon. I forgot her name. Please refresh my memory.
Oh, you know what? I do too.
I don't know that anymore.
I know who you're referring to, though.
Well, the daughter,
yes.
who we know ended up being that she only wanted to hurt Anthony, and he was subsequently killed accidentally. But I was wondering why you had her character hurt him instead of getting the courage to speak or to try to step in on the children's behalf.
Yeah. That is a very good question. I just looked it up. Her name was Cindy. Cindy Mellon. I didn't think about it at the time. It kind of surprised me when I got to that part of the novel, and that's how the plot came together for me. I hadn't planned it out ahead of time that she would be the one that actually hurt Anthony Little Eagle. But now when I think back at it, since my writing of fiction always has social issues embedded in it, I think that subconsciously I was trying to show that that's how oppression works. That the reader could, make guesses about whether Cindy had spoken up before. I mean, her father was a very powerful character. Well, stepfather was a very powerful character in her life. And obviously she saw her mother being totally passive and under his thumb. And he even had those tapes in her bedroom, if you recall, on the bookshelf above her bed where she slept. So I think subconsciously I just went with either she'd tried before to speak, or she knew better that she would be punished, that she might be next, or that he would take her and she'd be helpless or something like that. Were you surprised that when you came to that part and you found out that she was the one?
I was extremely surprised.
Right.
It really shocked me because I was like, what? I just knew that I knew what was going on. And then when I found it was her, I was like, nope, you were wrong. So yeah, that was a nice twist.
I was surprised too. I mean, when it came to that, I went, "Oh my God, this is what happened." Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you had a couple others too, I think.
I did. So my second question was, if we were to take these actions that Sylvia did and doing her own investigating and kind of doing some things she knew she shouldn't do to kind of figure out what was going on, what are the consequences if we were to do such? If we were in the field as she did these things, what would the consequences be?
Yeah. Oh, I would be fired. I would clearly be fired.
Could there be criminal charges brought against you?
Oh,
or?
I suppose that there could. I mean, there certainly were policy violations, ethical violations against the agency, which you could, there's a list of them. I mean, breaking into the agency attorney's office and stealing the file, making copies, giving them to somebody, confidential record outside, somebody outside, an investigative reporter yet who, I mean, Sylvia was out of control. Somebody described her as a dysfunctional alcoholic social worker who was unstoppable. So, when I was writing it, I was wondering, oh my God, am I going too far? Am I going too far? And then I thought, no, because what I really want is to raise the question, how far would you go? You were working in an agency and you saw that the agency was colluding with an injustice. And you tried to confront it, which Sylvia did, and what I would do too, and actually when I was working in the field, that's what I would do. And I was a social worker who tended to get in trouble. I remember the director of the agency I worked at when I was first a new social worker, hadn't done it before, called me into his office, and I thought, I was so out of it, I thought he was going to compliment me because I had written a letter to the Bureau of Indian Affairs telling them that the road to the reservation was unpassable and it needed to be paved. And I copied it to him and to my supervisor, and he called me into his office and chewed me out for doing it and said that was inappropriate. And who did I think I was? And my job was to help people, not to fix roads or something like that. So I think that the imbued in the whole novel are thoughts about things that maybe I did do and got into trouble for, and things that I thought about doing but I would never do because I would be fired.
Right.
Or because I didn't have the nerve or whatever. But basically, I was just sort of processing for myself and wanting you as readers to process for yourselves that question, how far would you go? What would you do next? How do you deal with working in a system where institutionalized oppression is part of the system?
Right.
Because we all have to do that.
Yeah. There are a lot of systems that way.
Yeah, I think you had one more, Georgette, right?
Yes, ma'am. And I think you answered it, or some of it, which was, what did you want us to get out of it? What should we take away?
Yeah, that is one thing, but it's only one. I have a list of things I want readers to get out of it. I wanted them to get out of it the whole issue of racial identity, the importance of racial identity, white racial identity, in this case, Native American racial identity, and understand that, Indian child welfare, poverty. So I'm curious, I'd like to throw it out to you and to Pamela, you too. I'm interested in what you did get out of it.
I got the confusion of the cultural identity crisis that they were having. That to me spoke really loudly, that Jamie didn't really want to connect with either one because his life was so, destroyed on either side in the way he was brought up. And then when he found out who he was, and then the crisis he had in the middle of trying to identify with who he was, and then just saying, his big question. So I really took that away, that he was confused about really who he was because his culture had been taken away, and then he was brought up to believe one other, something else.
Yeah. What were your thoughts about Sylvia's racial identity?
I thought, to be honest, the only thing I kept thinking was that she was wanted to be Indian.
She was an Indian wannabe and a culture thief. Yeah.
Yeah, that she wanted to be an Indian because I think that, and through when she would have her online meetings with her sponsor on AAA, her lack of wanting to divulge that she was really a white woman to be kicked out of the AA name because she wasn't from the tribe and she had lied, but she still kept going forward with it because I think she wanted to belong to something because she felt like she didn't really belong to anything. So that was my take on Sylvia.
I'm very glad that you got that out of that. I was hoping it would lead people to read more about racial identity development, because Sylvia was at actually a pretty advanced stage of white racial identity development, but she was at the stage where I'm not like the rest of you white people. I'm better than that. The self-righteous, and guilt-ridden kind of a stage.
Yeah, she kept always going back and identifying with, the tribal leaders and whatnot. She placed herself in the middle of an atmosphere and in a culture that really she didn't know anything about except her wannabe, kind of idea that she had going on.
I think for me, that was one of the main issues, that we had a white social worker who was an Indian wannabe and an American Indian investigative reporter who didn't want to be Indian.
Right. Yeah, he didn't really want to be anything.
Yeah. How about you, Georgette? I'd be interested in what you got out of it as a reader.
The biggest takeaway that I had from the story was the great amount of responsibility that I will have when I'm in this field.
Oh, yeah.
Going back to when the reporter, when he was a child, and the lack of knowledge that his social worker had, and the fact that she didn't check up on his family and kind of and even when he was an adult and they were looking into what happened with Anthony, the fact that certain people didn't do what they needed to do to make sure that that the family checked out and that they were putting children in safe environments, just kind of was a wake-up call to me that not only am I going to be helping people, but it's important that I really know, I'm trained properly and that I know how to help people in whatever the policies are that are in place, that I know those and I'm going by those guidelines so that I don't cause anyone any further hurt or damage, or I don't want to complicate things for anybody. I want to help people. So I just know that it's going to be important that I know what I'm doing so that I don't cause anybody anything negative by doing my job, which is supposed to be to help them.
Awesome. Yeah, I am delighted that that's what you got out of it. I wanted social workers who read it to get just that, and people who aren't social workers, I really wanted them to have a better understanding of how complicated it is. What an awesome responsibility it is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that when we recognize, especially through these classes, I've learned to recognize, because I think we go through our lives daily like on an autopilot. And I don't think that we stop sometimes to realize how different everybody is because we are on autopilot. I think that your book and through Heather's classes, I know now, in Maine is mostly a white state, so we don't have much racial diversity here in Maine. But I think that coming from a state that's mostly white with not a lot of cultural differences, I think that in my head now, I'm a lot more aware of that culture difference, that it's bigger in other places. I mean, we have it here, but I think that you go forward with everything that we're doing and you just become more aware of that diversity.
Yeah.
And I think that makes a big difference. And I think that's the best way we can help each other, is always be aware of that cultural diversity, you know, where it stops and starts.
And our own position in relation to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Dorothy, I know I put a little question at the bottom of the list of questions, but I am real curious because I find it difficult to help people understand the Indian Child Welfare Act and its purpose and intent. I thought you did an excellent job of really kind of educating the reader a little bit about the Indian Child Welfare Act. And I guess I'm curious, I mean, was that your intent? And the way you positioned it before the act and then post-act. Just what was your thinking around that?
That kind of fits, I think, Pamela, with the questions you had about why did I choose the Indian culture in the story, and is Native American culture of interest to me? The positioning of the 1972 story and the 2006 story was intentional. The pre-Indian Child Welfare Act and post-Indian Child Welfare Act. And I talked with a lot of social work professors or child welfare professors while I was writing about the post-Indian Child Welfare Act. And they were saying that they were very careful about teaching it, especially in states where there were several tribes. And yet they found that the students didn't appear to remember it.
Yeah.
When it was time to look at a child welfare situation, a protective services situation, a foster home situation. And so I tried to show that in the book. I also tried to show what Sylvia, who was Mrs. Waters in 1972, was up against when there were no controls. I mean, that was at the time of the American Indian movement. There was a lot of activism and a lot of voices trying to be heard about community and our children not being snatched away and put in white foster homes and taken from not only their parents and their families, but their whole community. So it was very intentional to try to, but I didn't, in the revision of the book, it started out, when I came to my final revision, I was sitting on an island in Mexico where I go every January and I write. And I was sitting there on the beach and I had my big notebook, and in big red letters it said, don't preach, focus on character and story. And I went through, and there was a lot of didactic stuff that I had in there about the Indian Child Welfare Act and about culture. And I took it all out because I thought people want the story. They're going to get to it through the story. And hopefully by adding discussion questions, it will be explored further. Like, what is the Indian Child Welfare Act?
Right.
And I'd like to say something more about why did I write this in the first place. And one person who's not here, a couple people actually who aren't here, had asked the question, what inspired me to write this? Not only this particular story, but the American Indian piece. And it really was, I think of what some other writer said once, is that the first draft is for yourself. When I wrote the first draft, I was really writing, it was totally different. You wouldn't even recognize it. It wasn't even a mystery at that point. I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And that was my own healing. And that was the story. I needed to tell that story for me. And then when I really went over it, revised and revised and revised, like I can't count the number of revisions, then it became the story for you, the reader. But initially, At the Center was first conceived because I was a social worker in a large, in the early 1970s, in a large geographic area that included a portion of an Indian reservation. And that was my territory. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was in my early 20s. I knew nothing about Native culture. I knew nothing about my culture. I mean, I was just as naive and green as Mrs. Waters was in the book. And so I'd sit at the community center and just sort of watch and be there. And then people would gradually start talking to me, which turned out to be just the right thing to do, you know. But one woman came to me one day, a mother who I knew had 6 children, and she came and asked me if I could find out what happened to her son. And I asked her which son and what happened. And she said, no, it's not one of the sons that are with me now. And she told me that she'd had a baby. It was during a time when she and her husband were drinking heavily, and all of their children had been placed in foster care. So the baby was placed in foster care at birth. And now the baby was 7 years old. And she hadn't had contact with him since he was 2. And she was having dreams, and she said she just wanted to find out what happened to him and was he okay. So I went back to the agency and started digging around in the archives because there was no record of this. Talk about the importance of recording, you know, keeping notes. And I found out that the boy was in the same foster home, that to him, the foster parents, it was a white foster home, to him, the foster parents were his parents. To his foster parents, he was their child. And what happened to determine what's in the best interest of the child when the parents were clearly able to care for 6 other children was traumatizing for everybody. The boy was traumatized. I was a part of the system that traumatized him. The parents were, at the center came from the birth mother who actually put her son at the center more than anybody else. She said, he does not know us. He does not know who we are. He doesn't know who, he knows who he is. He's 7 years old. And she came forward and said that they wanted to terminate their parental rights. But when we got to court, and I talked to them about that many, many times, what it meant, etc., I thought they understood. When we got to court, the judge said, no, I'm assigning you an attorney. This is not right. They went back to court again. The parents never said, no, we don't want to not terminate our parental rights, but the judge ordered the boy returned to his home within 3 days, no preparation. And I was assigned to drive him there. And he cried all the way until he passed out, essentially, from crying. And I placed him in a world that he knew nothing about and ripped him from the only parents he ever knew. And so really that tortuous and difficult journey has haunted me for over 40 years. So that's really why I wrote the book. And as a part of my experience on the reservation, I learned a whole lot, thanks to the wonderful people who educated me there, about the culture and the conditions that they were in. And I did get involved with activism with the American Indian movement. And by the way, you may also, since well, at least you, Heather, where you're located there in Iowa, we're trying to get Leonard Peltier exonerated by President Obama before he leaves office. There's a movement for that. So you can look up Leonard Peltier. He was an AIM leader who was falsely accused of killing an FBI agent, has been in jail for all these years. He's very ill. He's elderly. I'm feeling like sort of still connected with that, and also with what's going on not that far from you at Standing Rock.
Yes.
So my interest in American Indian situations started with, oh my God, we're going to be cut off, aren't we? Started with working as a naive, innocent white girl on the reservation to this day. So we are transformed too as social workers when we really take being an ally seriously instead of being a control agent of a system that doesn't always operate with the best interest of the child. But the Indian Child Welfare Act at least brought in a step that had to be taken before that baby was removed and placed in a foster home. And it provides a system and procedures for tracking and making sure that he's returned to his community. And one of the things that I think we are not aware of is when a child is taken from their culture, their family of birth, like that, there's a soul wound, no matter how well that child is treated. And I do have a little story to tell about. I was at a bookstore in Minneapolis, and I have a stepdaughter who was adopted from Korea. And somebody asked the question that one person asked here that I see about children being placed in white homes when they're not white themselves. And my answer was that the parents may be wonderful, but there's a soul wound. There's you got to know who you are. You got to know who your roots are. You got to identify with it. And I went out to dinner with my stepdaughter afterwards and my stepson. And she said, oh my God, she said, I just perked up. She said, my parents were wonderful to me. They gave me everything. They loved me. They're still wonderful. But what the hell were they thinking to raise me in an all-white town? She says, I will not step into that town. It's so painful. And then she was there with her daughter, who is half Korean and half Black. And her daughter spoke up and said, well, Mom, I'm Korean and Black, aren't I? And she says, yes, and you're living in a community where you have people who look like you. So it's, I was hoping that a lot of that would come out. In my next book, it'll come out around the Bronx. It will take place again in 2 time periods. Sylvia as a teacher, a 3rd grade teacher in the Bronx with mostly Black students, and then Sylvia 6 months after At the Center leaves, she reunites with JB because the school is torn down to rebuild a charter school, a for-profit corporate charter school, and a dead boy's body is found in the rubble, and Sylvia thinks she knows who it is. So Sylvia's still busy, and racial identity development and all of these issues are still at play. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on.
It's okay. No, you didn't. So there's a lot of truth in your alias is Mrs. Waters in this story, because that's in essence, your reflection of how you felt and her character.
Yeah. She started out being more like me though than she ended up. And I always assure people I did not have affairs with any of the American Indian Movement leaders. There were a lot of things Sylvia did that I never ever did, and that aren't me. But
I was talking about how naive you were at the beginning. Nothing else.
Oh my goodness, yes. Yeah. Which is another thing that I want to show this is going to be a mystery series of 3 books. And what I'm wanting to show is how we as social workers and professionals evolve through time, from innocent, wanting to do good, just wanting to be helpers, to understanding the complexities and as we mature. Yeah.
Well, I guess I would like to thank you, Dorothy, for being a good model for those who get a little older and decide they're going to I know that I'm going to start retiring. What am I going to do in my retirement? And to do this, it's fabulous. So
this is the best career I've had. I have finally in retirement found my passion.
That's marvelous.
But I couldn't do this without all that went before.
Exactly. Anything that you would like to add, Georgette, before we end?
No, just thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you sharing with us. It means a lot.
I want to thank you, Georgette and Pamela and Heather and all the other students who sent in questions, and hopefully we'll listen to the
Well, I want to thank you for writing the book and bringing the awareness of everything that you did. I thought that was pretty awesome. It was a great book. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. I hope you'll spread the word. I want more people to read it.
I kept it. Yeah, I kept it. I've got the book. So yeah, but it was a great read, and I thought it was awesome, and the culture stuff was really good. So
We're
thank
going to
you.
get our little book discussion group reading it in Ponca, Nebraska. So
Really? Oh, that's fantastic. That is just fantastic.
I'll let you know how it goes.
Thank you.
All
If you
right.
want, if they have questions, you can send me ahead. I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Fabulous. We might
I
bring
have a
you in.
friend who's in a book club in Minneapolis, and they knew the mother of the man who had written a book they were discussing, so they decided, she said that she'd arranged for them to talk to her son on the phone, so they were having this dispute about what the book meant. And they called him and they said, "What did you mean? What did you want us to think? We're having a difference of opinion." He says, "The hell if I know what I mean." So the reader becomes the creator.
We may be calling you. Well, thank you, Georgette. Thank you, Pamela. Great to have you online, and we'll post this so all of the other students can see it too. And Dorothy, thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank you, Heather, for setting this up. I said I wanted to thank Heather for setting this up. It was really nice to meet you. All that good stuff. Yeah.
Well, I have to give all the credit to Dorothy. She's the one who contacted me through a mutual friend we have, and said, "Would you like to do this?" So I didn't have the courage to ask until she offered. So
this is my first time on Zoom, and it's great.
Yeah.
I contributed that part. So it's great. Great partnership, great collaboration, and that's what social workers do. So have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Good luck with your program.
Thank you.